Sechs Minuten heiner wir goim de gulet palle, andre seg bari heim din landos jesike dejin holde, ridere ut ur Frankland med där då sirisar, bläse årin olivant pan ransan lalur valen, runde de oppe sine silje solde hogik skalgre, sigla de åt ur heiglein londo ik feker ruking ogdre, ridere under Frankland med håret och sitt sadel, bläser oit olivant på ransadal ur valen. Arne åt kankaret och inne på över hånken sanden, det är rollen kungar freden, tranden är fejstin palen, ridade untan Frankland med åt och sitt sadel, bläser lorin olivant på ranskadladun valen, slugga ser ut på ranservolen, indangat var och kalde, blammende fall för rollens världom tangsek virlarde, ridade ut vart Frankland med drajdor och sitt sadel, bläser då en olivant på ranskadladun valen. That is Roland's Skavadet, old Frankish song. You're curious. It's a fun one. It's very hard to pronounce. It's closer to Norwegian than it is to English. Whereas a lot of the newer French songs, you know, like one I did a couple of days ago, it's not that hard. It's not that hard at all. Welsh, much harder. Welsh is very hard. Old Frankish is very hard. French is not that hard. And it's a beautiful language, so if you're looking and learning the language, you know, why not learn French? Just stay away from the Parisian dialect, you know what I'm saying? Studying revolutionary French politics is so insane. Because you'll be like, I wonder when Robespierre was killed. And then be like, oh, Thermidor II. Thank you, France. Appreciate the clarity, you pricks. How weird is it that it's called the Dark Enlightenment? Edgelord Enlightenment, more like it. But the ironic reality is this occlusion of established morals in Christendom by calling back to ancient history isn't only the foundation of the Enlightenment, but the paramount philosophy of Gnosticism and its executive branch of Rosicrucianism as well. The troubadour balls of the Knights Templar. The distinct need to LARP as a Trojan hoplite despite being born in France. Everything that unbalanced the world previously is in line with the Enlightenment. Histrionic personality defect is one of the least flattering things in a male. Histrionics is the psychological need for attention, manifesting positively as showmanship and negatively as vexatiousness. Charlie Manson was more histrionic than he was crazy, but he was good at acting crazy, you see. Specifically, he would dose his convene with LSD while pretending to take it himself, and then doing basically freelance MKUltra work on his followers, which would operate to slander the good-natured anti-war homesteading hippie movement that indeed was taken down by sex, drugs, rock and roll, the same as the anti-establishment counterculture punk and metal movements were also completely and utterly weaponized against the people inside of them to become the squares and to become, like, not only card-carrying members of the establishment, but indeed their strongest warriors. Tampa is such an awful place. It is also sandwiched between New Venice, up to the north of them, and New Naples, down to the south of them. Some of the most pretentious pricks and some of the most thoughtless thugs in Europe, respectively. The Tampa Mafia helped to assassinate Kennedy, as golems are wont to do, and the reward is living in hell, but it floods all the time. But hey, it's important to live through droughts, only then do you truly appreciate storms. Am I right, guys? My plants started to sprout up from the ground. My rhizomes have finally activated, and now they're getting up there, which is like, oh, I was so worried that I lost a whole crop of turmeric because of the intense droughts, but I see it popping up, popping up. Diligent work. I'm a little scraped up for working with the aloes today, but that's fine. It'll heal. It's a labor of love, baby. Oh, yeah. You ever read Hatchet? It's a story about survival. Not really. It's actually about watching your step. Don't run with scissors. NASA's been subtly sounding the alarm on this for a few months now, but I'm pretty sure there are plans in the near future to try and mine the moon for resources. You know that thing that controls the tides? And it indicates to the water inside of plants what direction to sprout towards from a seed? That moon. Not Josh Moon. On second thought, we're mining Josh Moon for biofuel. Into the reactor with ye stalker slobbermutt child. You didn't love Israel enough. You are an unclean goyim. Be gone with you and all your hamsters and kiwis. I mean, it's entirely possible that they're going to try and put explosives in the moon and then threaten people on Earth with the destruction of the moon if they don't pay tithe. You know, because why else would they pay tithe to people in space that aren't doing anything for them, other than the fact that they have essentially lasers and I guess rail guns pointed at the Earth and crack, you know, rail guns launch a piece of, say, just a piece of rebar, crack the crust where it lands, because it lands with so much kinetic force that it just explodes and goes super deep and just cracks open the crust of the Earth, causing tectonic problems and increase of hurricanes, which also, not hurricanes, earthquakes, which also happens in areas where they frack. They send in high-pressured salt water to push the liquid resources up out of the ground, causes a bunch of microfractures in the area over time that vastly increases the prevalence of earthquakes in that same area. You know, I hear people moralizing about Turkey Tom hitting people when they're down and ensuring group harassment. Every time I'm struck with the irony of me being that for kiwi farms. Moralizing about the attitudes and actions leading to negative outcomes while trying to wrestle with the tide to no avail. Now, I know he gets things wrong sometimes. We all do. We all get things wrong sometimes. Every single one of us. The person that you love so much because you go to them for news and updates and tabloid spectacles also get stuff wrong 5 to 20% of the time on average. You know, every single one of us. Every single one of us. If you find somebody that gets stuff wrong only like 1% of the time, you're dealing with somebody with an incredibly stringent, incredibly advanced form of basically self-regulation, right? Word's not coming to me. You know what the proper word should be. Need to read more books. You know, I wanted it to be better than it was, but it was never mine to change. Same with Turkey Tom's work. You can only be part of the zeitgeist, not control it. Criticize, bemoan, can't fight the inevitable. You know, being pro-Palestine in the year of our Lord, 2025, is a lot like being anti-pedophile. It's an absurdly popular opinion that even clingers on are taking for clout, yet there are still people taking the opposite argument and trying to normalize something absurdly immoral with talking points only they get off on. I think when homosexual people stole the word gay from the lexicon and warped it from happy to homo, it was a real critical hit against logic and sanity in favor of said inverts. But when gay people use the term queer, it's like black people self-identifying as colored. It's just pure counterculture inversion. And it's very weak and alienating to the people propagating it to try and own the insult. It's also a perfect example of reverse psychology in action. If you always go 180 degrees away from a loud noise, then you're a farm animal. Simple as that. Caring about October 7th, after all we know about the Hannibal Directive, them killing their own people, Mossad ignoring the warnings about impending terror attacks despite the fact that there were so many of them, is like caring about Drake after his bodyguard got shot when Kendrick dropped the They Not Like Us track. I guess multiple tracks in that particular saga. Regardless, like, you know, in the most convenient for him time, his bodyguard got shot, which was very likely his own doing. And that is exactly the same as October 7th, being some huge bloody shirt to wave, saying, terrorists, 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 terrorists. When in reality, your people are committing, like, you know, Durlawanger Brigade levels of terrorism, levels of immorality in the real world that everybody can see. And thinking that that's a good argument. It's not, you know. It's exactly like Drake arguing for his own, you know, protection and sympathy after ensuring that his bodyguard got shot by one of his own guys or somebody he's in network with. And nobody is buying it. Nobody is buying it. Yeah, sure, the people who listen to Drake all the time and will fight people over Drake care about that still. But most people, if they were on the fence, like, I didn't care about Drake. I never thought about Drake. His music was lame and boring. It was like unflavored gruel. It's the equivalent of what it was in musical equivalent of what it was. And now, naturally, I can see he is a monster and a pedophile. And that's exactly the same as Israel. Like, everybody sees it more and more as time goes on. People will see the arguments against Israel and the arguments for Israel. And if you really think these petty little, like, childish cherry-picking some individuals' like personal flaws to try and excuse mass killing of children, starvation of men, women, and children, the destruction of non-combatant areas, the destruction of preschools and hospitals, absolute and utter, like, bulldozing of an entire civilization where people lived. If you think that that's a good idea to defend to anybody in any timeline, you are mentally unwell. You are so out of line. And it just goes to show, you know, people will take their sides, people will stand against the tide, and they'll try to change things despite the fact that they're only one tiny part of the zeitgeist. They are not the full wave. You can be riding the wave, but you're not the full wave. It's not you, buddy. I can list a good portion of people that went from normal, emotionally controlled people to feral freaks over that one issue while ignoring all the other issues. All the other issues on the world just completely go under the radar. Yet that's the one that they need to talk about all the time. And it's very telling. It's very, very, very telling. Simultaneously, you know, free Palestine, free Sudan. Straight up. Duh. Free Libya. Duh. Hillary Clinton destroyed that country. Duh. Free Iraq. Why are we occupying them? What did they ever do to us? Ever. Other than fight back when their own country was invaded. I'm glad Uday Hussein isn't controlling the country right now, though. But he wasn't the one in line to take over. That was Saddam's other son, who's actually had a decent head on his shoulders. You know, but if you dare exercise nuance in regards to radical Islam, people get exactly like that bent out of shape. And it's like, you know, this might have worked in 2001, 2002, but we are already living in the aftermath, and I see a lot of people hypocritically going back on a lot of stuff that they said about how negatively their own country was impacted by the policies rolled out after 9/11 with the excuse of there's some evil terrorist Muslim out there that we got to go get. And they are completely 180ing on this particular issue because power structures, financial structures have deemed it to be sacrosanct, and you must take this side and you cannot take the other side. Well, history itself has a lot to say about those sorts of tactics, and we will see how that rolls out. I have the distinct feeling, although my, calls aren't always correct, I have the distinct feeling that is not going to work out for people very well. And when you see people 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line saying, oh, no, I never did that, and you remember that they did, call their asses out on it. For real, though. Make them grovel on their knees and beg to be forgiven by people for insulting them so much. It's exactly how you view Vito Gasalti, the pedophile. He should not be invited back into normal society ever. But if he ever wants to be talked to like a human being again, he should be on his hands and knees begging for forgiveness, repenting for all the things that he said pro-pedophilia-wise. That is exactly the same with Israel. That is exactly the same with Israel. That is exactly the same with all of Israel's defenders. Not joking. Not joking. If you really care about the long-term health of Israel, then you wouldn't support this Netanyahu psychopathic, Zion-Nazi behavior. But there are a lot of neo-Nazis that specifically want to see as much destruction in the Middle East as possible. They don't care about children. They'll talk about Muhammad having sex with a child, which is something that happened canonically, a little girl named Aisha. They'll talk about that, but they'll completely ignore all the children being just killed by gun drones in Gaza and throughout the Middle East. They'll completely ignore that. So if people aren't consistent with their ideals, you know that something's up. I've said it once, I've said it again, I'll say it 1,000 times. Taking Israel's side after they kill a bunch of children is like defending pedos. It's not something you need to do. It's not something the American government went and did after we went to go save babies that we thought were being thrown out of Kuwaiti incubators. We were there to save children. That was our morality, and it's still our morality. It's like some of our lower morality, not even our higher, like we want to help people, eat and build and stuff like that. Our higher morality, our most basic morality, fundamental to both Western civilization, Christendom, and humanity in general, is that if you start killing children, it doesn't matter what excuse you are, you need to be audited, you need to explain yourself. And if you can't explain yourself other than they're bad, we need to get them. You are a monster. You are a, Nazi-level demon. And you never should have come here. Engineering is such a tricky thing to quantify. 20% of the people coming out of our colleges are engineers. So it's a very oversaturated and very wide field. But it's also aligned with his mental plague on display recently of transhumanism. Materialism needs balance with moral goalposts. And the specific reason why is actually showcased in nature pretty succinctly. What is cancer? Cancer is when cells no longer get their proper death cycle programming. So they just grow and they grow and they grow. And that's what a tumor is. That's what a toma is. It's just a consistent growth without any death cycle, and it grows up this unusable mound of biological material. That is what cancer is. That is exactly the problem with hypermaterialism, with infinite growth philosophy, is that all it is doing is turning the most capable, the most productive people into active cancer nodes that are metastasizing, sucking resources from other portions of the body, and growing these unusable lumps that don't, like Dubai, that don't synchronize with anything else in the grander body, and don't even serve their own local regions, their own local areas. That's a very good point on infinite growth, I would say. All right, y'all, that's good for today. Hope everyone has a good weekend. Happy Friday. Cheers.